Thanks for staying with us here on Morning Live. Now, the South African Federation of Trade Unions, that's Saftu, has chastised government for the death of illegal miners at Stilfontein in the Northwest Province. Now, the government-led rescue mission at the disused Stilfontein mine shaft has recovered about 78 bodies and rescued 228 illegal miners as rescue operations continue. Now, Saftu is exploring legal avenues to hold the government accountable for illegal miners that have died underground. The Minister of Mineral Resources, Gwede Manrtashe, says that government should not be blamed for the deaths of the illegal miners. But to shed more light on this developing story and their view on it, we join now on the line virtually by Saftu General Secretary Zwelinzima Vavi. Mr. Vavi, good to have you with us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to Len and everybody are working with the good and happy new year to all of you guys.
Oh, thanks so much. And to you, Mr. Vavi, getting straight to it, the Minister of Mineral Resources, Gwede Manrtashe, says government should not be blamed for the deaths of the illegal miners at Stilfontein. But as Saftu, you disagree because you say that government should be held accountable and you will pursue that. Why is that?
Well, we put the blame squarely on the doorsteps of the government for the following reason. One, South African government have allowed that the migration policies of South Africa must not be effective and must not be implemented, making it possible for thousands and thousands of undocumented workers from all over the world to come into the country willy-nilly. It is the consequences of failure to manage the immigration policies and the influx into South Africa by everybody who wish to do so that we have this crisis in our hands. Secondly, government has passed 8 pieces of legislation on making itself the primary regulator of the mining industry and the custody of the minerals in South Africa. These range from the right to give permission to every mining company seeking to close its operation in South Africa, and that certificate can only be issued once the government is satisfied that the mining company has sealed the mine, has rehabilitated the mine, has ensured that the environmental issues and destruction around the mine is addressed such that the mine can be livable, or the communities around the mine can use that land for other purposes. Government has dismally failed to ensure that these regulations and laws are enforced by the mining companies. Up to the extent, as we speak, the Auditor General told us 2 years ago that there are about 6,100 mines that have not been properly closed, that are not sealed, where environment has not been addressed, and where it is possible for anybody to come in and out of those mines willy-nilly. And that's why we put the blame on the doorsteps of the government. And lastly, we were in Stilfontein on the 21st of November last year. When we were there, we were not even allowed to come anywhere close to that dark hole because government had just announced a 3-phase operation to rescue those mine workers, or call them zamazamas, you call them anything you wish to. That was on the 21st of November. It has taken up to the 13th of January, the 2 months down the line, for the government to begin this operation. And by the time it starts those operations, it finds so far 78 people dead and 216 or about that seriously malnourished, almost dying from starvation and hunger. And therefore, the point we're making as the Federation Saftu, who cares about the human rights of everybody, who understand the constitutional requirement in line with Section 11 of the Constitution that puts an obligation on the state first and foremost to protect the right to life of anybody within the borders of South Africa, including during the emergencies. That therefore the government didn't take steps to make sure that the people are not do not die unnecessarily as they have died in Stilfontein. And secondly, the Constitution gives an obligation to the government to protect everybody's right to dignity. You cannot tell me that the government have played its part in terms of protecting the dignity of those workers who no longer get out of Shaft 11. And that's the point that we want to address again, Sakina. So, it is physically, sorry.
I just want to get a few questions in, Mr. Vavi, in the interest of time, because you raised some very interesting issues. The fact that life is sacrosanct, you know, the constitutional provisions that come into play here as per the Bill of Rights. But there has to be questions around accountability. When you say government needs to be held accountable, what do you mean by that exactly? Held accountable how? And what about accountability by other protagonists in this particular instance, like the miners themselves who are mining there illegally, and also the company owners? Who are they? Who owns that mine, and what sort of accountability should be had from them?
When we say government has a right to be the custodian of the minerals in our country, we mean that they are the regulator. They issue the licenses. They issue the certificate to close the mine. No one else but the Department of Mineral and Energy have that responsibility. You can't tell me when you have that responsibility that you don't know who abandoned the mine, 6,100 of them. You cannot tell us that you have no idea that there were people who are mining illegally in any of the mines that you are custodian of. You cannot tell me that people go into the mining industry and hold in there for 3 to 6 months just below your nose. It means that you are sleeping on duty. It means that you are not taking your responsibility seriously. And therefore, when things like this happen, you bear the responsibility. Let's clarify two things, Sakina. It is not possible for anyone who would have been dropped down 2.8 kilometers in Shaft 11 to come out without being assisted to do so. The communities in Stilfontein, Koma, have created a makeshift structure to be able to do so, to drop water, food, and to drop each other. And it takes almost an hour to take out one person in that method. It is a very risky business that should have never been allowed by a caring government in the first place. The second point that we must just emphasize, whilst we are on the same point, there is no way out of that Shaft 11 except through Shaft 10, a nearby shaft, which is about 37 hours away from Shaft 11. And you have to do that through crawling on your knees and your arms to be able to do so. And we're wondering now, how many of those miners would have tried when they were already very weak to crawl between Shaft 11 and Shaft 10 and perished on their way to Shaft 10. And that's why we are worried that the company that have been contracted to rescue these workers and is now announcing that it may have reached the end of its operation yesterday. We wonder whether they are not, again, chasing a profit to take that most of the 12 million rands unused as a profit.
But then there has to be questions about the, again, accountability of the miners themselves, Mr. Vavi, that you do not touch on? And also because you seem to be stripping their agency. There were miners who last year already, as you say, once that announcement was made, there were people who were coming to the surface. So there obviously were people who stayed there for whatever reason, whether willingly or unwillingly, but there has to be some accountability on that score as well.
The people who came out, about 1,500 of them, came out through Margaret Shaft in Stilfontein, totally not connected to Shaft 11 in Buffelsfontein. It is possible and physical for them to come out of Shaft 5 in Stilfontein and Shaft 10 in Buffelsfontein. But it is practically and physically not possible for them to come out at Shaft 11.
Let me ask this, Mr. Vavi, and I apologize for interjecting, but we do have time pressure. So when they went down, how did they then think they were going to come up? Surely there had to be a plan. So what was the plan? Because now we're saying because of the rescue operation, it was going to be practically impossible. But surely when people go underground, they have a route and they know how they will come back up again. And also, people have been underground for so long, mining whatever minerals they are. Where are those minerals? Who's buying it? Because surely there's much more accountability that needs to be had here.
Precisely the point that we're making, that at the end, government should have never allowed a situation where people will make it possible to take such a risk on their lives and go down through a rope 2.8 kilometers away. Where was the police? Where was the Department of Mineral and Energy? Where was the intelligence of South Africa that must protect the interest of the country? All of them were sleeping. This happened right below their nose. It should have never happened. And people we must make this clear. We are not protecting illegality. We are not protecting the illegal operations. Yes, in the past, and we continue to do so. We have made countless calls on government to nationalize the mines, to hand over those operations that have been abandoned by the big profiteers who have moved elsewhere in the African continent to communities and to the workers. We have said to government, make this Zama business safe for people to be able to work in. Don't just look on the other side and ignore it. And government has ignored our calls, and now this is the consequences of a totally unregulated industry, which is then infiltrated by criminal syndicates. Now, to answer your question, Sakina, it is criminals from all over the world who are operating and exploiting the existence of the minerals. The minister, Gwede Manrtashe, was saying that we are losing up to 26 billion rands annually because of the illicit mineral trade industry that is operating right below the attention of South African government.
All right. We have to leave it there, unfortunately. Zwelinzima Vavi, thanks for your time. South African Federation of Trade Unions, Saftu's General Secretary, saying that government needs to shoulder the blame for the death of the illegal miners at Stilfontein in the Northwest Province. Feel free to let us know your thoughts at Morning Live SABC.